Okay, we're recording.
Excellent. Thank you. It is 6 o'clock on January 22nd, 2025. I'm calling to order the first TAB meeting of the year for the city of Boulder. Um, why don't we start with our technical host and rules, assuming everybody who's in the waiting room has been let in?
Yes. Okay, thank you for attending the Transportation Advisory Board meeting. To strike a balance between meaningful, transparent engagement and online security, the following rules will be applied for this meeting. This meeting has been called to conduct the business of the city of Boulder. Activities that disrupt, delay, or otherwise interfere with the meeting are prohibited. The time for speaking or asking questions will be limited to 3 minutes. And if you're joining by phone, use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Each person shall register to speak at the meeting using that person's real name. Any person believed to be using a name other than the one they are commonly known by will not be permitted to speak at the meeting. No video will be permitted except for city officials, employees, and invited speakers. All others will participate by voice only. The person presiding at the meeting shall enforce these rules by muting anyone who violates any rule. The Q&A function is enabled and it will be used for individuals to communicate with the host. It should only be used for technical platform-related questions. Only the host and individuals designated by the host will be permitted to share their screen during this time.
Thanks very much, Sydney. So we have not met since just before the Thanksgiving break. And as is unfortunately typical, every time that there is a fatality on our transportation network, it is our custom to open up the TAB meeting following that with a recognition of another failure of the system. A 73-year-old man who was running, his name is Richard Poley, had a collision with a cyclist on one of our multi-use paths. This is, of course, one of the more rare instances of traffic fatalities that we see in Boulder, but it's on our transportation network. It is a reminder that we would like to take care everywhere and every time we're traveling in the city of Boulder, and I don't want it to go unremarked. But I am informed investigation is still ongoing as to the cause of the crash. There has been a determination not to charge anyone, I believe, and Boulder Police Department had made a statement that excessive speed was not considered a factor in the crash. So we, of course, strive for 0 deaths on our transportation network, and we will continue to do so. I don't know if anyone, Valerie, if you have anything to add or any new information since we last discussed this.
Good evening. My name is Garrett Slater, and I am acting as the director for this evening's TAB. Valerie is out of town. And,
thank you. I didn't realize that. Sorry.
Yes. Valerie did indicate this might be a question, and I did check in with her, and she said we have no new information about this matter to update at this time.
Okay. Would any other member of TAB like to weigh in? Yeah. It's sad. And it's particularly sad for me because I would like to encourage more active transportation. And sometimes these things happen. So it is, of course, a consideration as we've been talking to Boulder County about the new bikeway, the Highway 119 bikeway. I recall some conversations specifically with Boulder County staff about sightlines at particular locations where cyclists will be entering or exiting the bikeway, and in particular conflicts between slower users. Those comments were well taken, and I think they informed the design. So at this particular crash location, I can't imagine that we could make the sightlines any better. But work continues to keep everyone safe, and I would appreciate and do appreciate our ongoing partnership with staff and city staff and county staff in doing so. Thank you. Okay, I haven't pulled up the agenda. That's what I'm looking for badly. A little scattered this evening, my apologies. But I believe we are ready to move on to the next item of the agenda, which I am expecting will be an approval of last meeting's minutes. Is that correct? Can someone help me out here?
That's correct. Approval of November 18th minutes.
That's right. Good. Does any tab member have any additions, corrections, clarifications? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the draft minutes of the November tab meeting.
I move that we approve the draft minutes of the November 18th tab meeting.
Well said, sir.
I second.
Thank you, madam. Any discussion? Well, no, because we already asked for that. All in favor? Thanks very much. The minutes are approved. Thank you, Meredith, again for another excellent job. Okay, we will turn it over now to public comment and open this up to members of the public who would like to speak. If you are on the Zoom call, please raise your hand. I'm going to hand this over back to Sydney to handle the logistics and the calling and the unmuting and all that. Appreciate your help. Thank you.
The fun stuff. So just a reminder, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and that timer will actually show up in my window. It's kind of small, but it'll be in, yeah, my video. Lynn, it looks like you are up first. I'm going to give you access to speak. There, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, just a second here. I just came in. I was walking today. I don't know how to walk anymore, really, because I'm always riding my bike. But just to slow down too much, you know, really. But you know, with the big snowy part where you're just digging, like there'd be too many times I just have to get off my bike. But I missed that address of where this crash was, and I really would like to know more information. It's not because I'm nosy, it's because I want to, I'm an empath, and I feel like anyone that could get in a crash for whatever reason, I want to know about it so that I can at least try to avoid doing the same thing. And so for me, it's real kind of critical that the police haven't added anything more to this. It seems like it happened a while ago, and that there's just not, it's just like closed up, and that how many people have been hurt by a similar situation because they didn't know. I don't think that's helpful. So what can we do to get more information put forth? You know, if people are saying, oh, it's for the security of the person or the situation, well, what about the security of all the other bike riders that want to deal with this? And as far as, oh, first of all, I wanted to say Free Palestine, and that's very important because, and the reason I bring up Palestine with this group is that all of these transportation projects and all of this work that all of you are doing are all for naught if we're blown up in World War III on an issue with Palestine. And I'm confident that it will come to that. And so that's why I bring it up. Now, it's just like a major genocide. I mean, the whole world is upset about this, and it's just not okay. And it's just a bad precedent to set for justice and law and all of these things that we deal with in the community all the time. And I wanted to bring up just how critical it is, which, you know, I always say this, that you know, family-friendly neighborhoods, you know, I'm a family too. I might be only one person, but I'm a family and I live in this house and sometimes other people live here too. And why am I singled out as like, and why is the density set up based on this? And
Thank you, Lynn.
I don't have anyone else for public comment.
Looks like you're muted, Tila.
Yeah.
I'm playing with two devices. It's a bad idea tonight. I don't see anyone else either. So last chance for members of the public to raise hands or chime in. Going. Thank you very much. We will now close public comment and move on. We're actually going to move directly to matters and matters from staff for the access management and parking update.
All right. Good evening, tab members. Let me get my screen up. Sorry, one second. All right. Okay. All right. Good evening. Oh gosh, it's doing crazy things. Good evening, tab members. My name is Lisa Hood. I'm a planner with Planning and Development Services, and I'm joined by my teammates on this project, Chris Haglund from Transportation and Mobility and Samantha Bromberg from Community Vitality. We're really excited to bring an update on the Access Management and Parking Strategy, or AMPS project, specifically the code and policy enhancements that we've been working on. We last talked to you back in October, so we've been hard at work. We've been doing lots of best practices research, further developing our options and recommendations, and that's what we'll be showing to you tonight and hoping for your feedback. We have a pretty short presentation, about 10 minutes, so we're going to get through all three topics. There's lots more detail if you need it on each of those topics, but we wanted to give you just a brief overview, and then we can take questions at the end. And again, yeah, we're hoping for feedback as we move forward on this project. Just a reminder that AMPS is really a three-part project, so we're represented by the three different departments and these three different focus areas. So our off-street parking requirements, what we require on private property, our transportation demand management, or TDM requirements, and how we manage our on-street parking. Since all three of those topics relate to parking in some way, that's why we wanted to look at those holistically. And as we shift and change each one of these, they affect the other. So that's why we've been doing this as kind of a three-part project. Just a reminder on the project scope and applicability. This project was put into the work plan to implement the final outstanding recommendations from the AMPS report that City Council adopted back in 2017. The two remaining items that we haven't yet completed from that report were updating the off-street parking standards and developing a TDM plan ordinance for new developments. The project was paused, as we talked about last time we saw you. It was paused for a few years during COVID, but as we reinitiated it last year, we had a new factor to bring in, which is the state bill that was passed that prohibits local governments from having minimum parking requirements for multifamily residential uses within a certain distance of transit. And so that added a new dimension to the project to incorporate compliance with that state bill. And then we also wanted to, as we thought about pushing the envelope a little bit farther than the original AMPS report had envisioned, that was really just going to be reduction of parking standards, but taking the step towards eliminating parking requirements, minimum parking requirements. We wanted to make sure we're incorporating those on-street parking management strategies. So we're doing that holistic review of everything that's related to parking in the city. In terms of applicability, I do want to be clear, the changes, like any code change, would apply to new developments and redevelopment. And so it wouldn't actually apply retroactively. So it would only come into effect as properties are seeking permits or land use approvals. Then they would be required to come into compliance with new standards. But it's not like we would be taking a property that's just kind of sitting there, not requesting anything from the city, and then applying these new regulations. That's just not how code changes typically work. So again, it focuses on new development and redevelopment. I'm going to talk really briefly about the off-street parking standards, and then I'll pass it over to Chris and Sam. As you would have seen in the memo, which linked to the City Council memo for tomorrow, the recommendations related to off-street parking, staff is continuing to recommend eliminating minimum parking requirements citywide for all land uses. That's something we heard TAB express support for last time we talked to you all. We've done a lot more best practice research on this and studying how parking is utilized in the city, and we continue to recommend that moving forward into community engagement. We also looked at maximum parking requirements. A lot of cities that eliminate their minimum parking requirements will add maximum parking requirements. And in looking at the data, it just didn't seem that adding maximum parking requirements citywide has much of an impact on travel behavior or the amount of parking that's provided in a way that would be kind of worth the cost benefit of the administration of a maximum parking requirement. There's definitely utility for maximum parking requirements in specific areas like we have in the Boulder Junction area. So we'd want to have the opportunity for that kind of more location specific maximums, but not necessarily at a citywide scale. We've heard a lot of comments about bicycle parking design standards and looking at our bicycle parking requirements. That is part of the same chapter of the code that we're looking at. We did look at over 30 peer communities on their number of bike parking stalls that are required, and Boulder is one of the highest in of those communities that we looked at. So we already have fairly high numerical requirements, but I think there's opportunity for us to relook at our design standards and see how we can accommodate the type of bikes that are more common these days, and also make sure that we're ensuring that there's secure parking throughout the community for those who are biking. There are some other topics related to shared parking and EV charging that we also looked further into, and just are going to continue studying how we can support shared parking. And then for EV charging, our requirements are actually in our energy conservation code. And when we look at other communities, they're pretty in line with what other communities are doing, and there wouldn't be much utility to adding that to the zoning code as well, since it's already in our energy conservation code. So that's a very fast overview of the recommendations related to off-street parking. I will pass it over to Chris, who will talk about TDM.
Thank you, Lisa. Chris Haglund, Principal Project Manager of Transportation and Mobility, here to talk to you about our work on our TDM ordinance for new development. Next slide, please. Thank you. In the fall of 2024, boards and councils supported a tiered approach to ensure that the focus of this new ordinance is on the largest and most impactful developments, and to help manage additional staffing needs and resources required to manage a new ordinance program. Following that input, staff conducted additional work on using a three-tiered approach. This is based on some best practices found in the city of Denver that we've been working closely with. Tier 0 would be the smallest projects. These projects would be exempt. Tier 1 would be a middle level of development. They would have required TDM plans and annual financial guarantees, which I'll discuss later, but would not have specific targets and monitoring. Tier 2, however, would be the largest, most significant projects with the biggest impact on surrounding areas. These would have vehicle trip generation targets based on land use, location, and size, and both annual and remedial financial guarantees to fund those ongoing TDM programs at the site, and monitoring and a compliance cycle as well. Site review automatically triggers based on development size. So this would ensure that all large developments would be subject to the ordinance. But besides the smallest projects, those that would fit in Tier 0, staff is also recommending exemptions for zoning that already have trip reduction ordinances. This includes MU4, RH6, and RH7. This was for land uses first found in Boulder Junction, but now are appearing in community plans in other parts of our city. And then to advance our city affordable housing goals, we would also recommend either fully or partially exempting 100% affordable housing. And I think this is something we can discuss how that would be done. Next slide, please. So initial input from boards and council in that fall of 2024 also included some input on the purpose of the ordinance. And what we heard loud and clear was the purpose of this new TDM ordinance would not only be to mitigate the impacts and provide improved multimodal infrastructure and access, but to use this ordinance as a way to provide ongoing contributions to our city's transportation and climate goals. The new TDM ordinance would solve issues with our current process and provide clarity and expectation for TDM plans for city staff, developers, tenants, and the public. In developing a TDM plan ordinance, there really are two key challenges that we need to address. The first is having a development requirement on a property owner, but knowing that TDM plans and all the traditional and innovative TDM programs, services, and incentives are actually implemented by tenants. The second thing, knowing that TDM programs, especially our most successful ones like the Eco Pass or Vanpool subsidies, these are things that have ongoing annual costs. Based on best practices and borrowing a lot from 2 municipalities in Virginia, the overarching approach centers on expanding the use of the city's current use of financial guarantees for those tier 1 and 2 tier projects. Annual financial guarantees would be put in place by first the developer and then the ongoing owner. And this would provide annual funding that is used by tenants or property managers to implement approved TDM plans. Again, our most effective TDM programs have annual costs. And so we need to have that mechanism in place to fund those over time. The remedial funding would just be for the highest tier 2. And this remedial financial guarantee is used to augment annual funds if the property is exceeding its vehicle trip generation target and is out of compliance. So those augment those annual funds and tries to get that property back into compliance. And then the annual funds would be raised, the requirement would be raised if we found a successful level of funding that worked. Initial financial guarantees rates, the rates of which we would charge the developers and then property owners would be based on size, estimated employees or residential units, and the estimated cost of required TDM plan elements. This approach and expanded use of financial guarantees really provides the mechanism for property owners to pay the ongoing annual cost of TDM programs. And of course, this does equate to a new ongoing cost to property owners of our largest developments. But we also have to remember that the removal of minimum parking requirements equates to a significant cost savings related to the construction and maintenance of parking spaces. And then that savings can be used for these types of TDM programs. Next slide, please. So to summarize, staff is recommending that the city continue to use its financial guarantee model, but expand it into an ongoing program, and then also to use that tiered approach, not only to focus on the largest, most significant developments, but also to help manage those additional staff costs and resources. So you can imagine we can set those tier thresholds and triggers at a way to manage both things, manage our focus on the most important projects and for city staff resources. We're also recommending exemptions as well for some types of development. Based on TAB's input and then City Council's input at the study session tomorrow, staff will continue to work on this policy and kind of work on the details of the other elements of a TDM ordinance, which includes the triggers and thresholds, the vehicle trip generation targets and methodologies, the financial guarantee rates, which TDM plan elements would be required in the process, and then also what is the monitoring process and compliance requirements. And that is what I have. I will pass it on to Sam.
Thanks, Chris. Sam Bromberg from Community Vitality. You might be able to hear I'm a little under the weather today, so I apologize in advance. I'm going to do my best not to sneeze during this presentation. If you recall, our two main focus areas for the on-street parking management strategies are enhancing the effectiveness of the existing neighborhood parking program, also known as NPP, and recommendations for new and redeveloped areas in response to the possibility of eliminating parking minimums. Next slide, please. The following are recommendations to enhance the effectiveness of the existing program, as well as, address the evolving needs of Boulder's residential and mixed-use neighborhoods. They include evaluating and adapting policies for non-residential parking in NPP zones, particularly near schools, commercial areas, and other high-demand zones, which could include replacing the current 2 or 3 hour time limits for non-permit holders with paid parking, to collaborate with the Boulder Valley School District to formalize park and walk zones around elementary schools, to consider reducing the number of guest and visitor permits available in overcrowded NPP zones. Currently, residents can purchase up to 2 visitor permits with no annual usage limits in addition to multiple guest permits, creating potential for misuse. So we could consolidate them into a simplified system and reduce the amount available while making sure that residents can still have access to that particular element of the program. Exploring limiting NPP permits to 1 per eligible resident or driver to reduce excess vehicle storage and align parking permits with actual need. We could consider as well implementing an escalating rate structure for households requesting multiple permits, to establish a TDM wallet for NPP residents by working with vendors to develop a program framework to encourage the use of alternative transportation options, and considering further limiting the availability of residential and visitor permits on mixed-use blocks or for mixed-use buildings to ensure that curbside access in those areas balances the residential needs with those of businesses, visitors, and employees of the area. Next slide, please. The following are recommendations for new and redeveloped areas, and these are just to limit new NPP programs to only areas significantly impacted by commercial activity, schools, or recreational facilities, and to develop thresholds for when a new NPP is proposed for an area impacted by new or redevelopment based on utilization data and anticipated new trip generation. And that concludes my section.
All right, so that's all 3. We've joined all of the recommendations for the various topics onto this slide if it's helpful. And then I also repeated just the questions that we had in the tab memo. Essentially, there's a lot of words on here, but essentially we're looking for your feedback on each of the recommendations for each of the 3 topics, or for the recommendations, and whether you support the direction that staff is going in, or if you'd like to see us tweak certain things. We'd love to hear that, and I look forward to your questions and discussion.
Thanks very much, team. So typically what we would like to do is open this up for clarifying questions if people have them, and then circle back to tab members who want to sort of give feedback. And is it, Darcy, you've been the staff liaison between tab and staff on this effort, is that correct? So when it comes, like, let's do our clarifying questions, but then I would really like to hear from you first in terms of the substance of this, just to see what went into it, if you could advise us on the process there. So Darcy, Mike, and Trini, do you have any questions at this point to clarify? Mike.
Yeah. On the neighborhood parking program, you talked about limiting future implementation of that. Is it in the scope of what you're looking at to increase the prices for these programs? I understand they can be pretty low, about $50 a year, which is subsidizing private vehicles, and so that's my question.
Great question. I think we will be looking at that in the scope of this work. We have been working on a financial analysis of the program which we're planning to share a little bit later on when we revisit our final recommendations for the guest and visitor permits and all of the different kinds of permits and paid parking and the things that we can implement while we're making changes to this program. So absolutely, that's part of the work that is already underway.
Sam, can you remind me? I know that the price of the annual permits went up recently from like $17 to $30 a year for ramp or NPP residents. Is there another scheduled price hike?
So the last price hike from the original Revitalizing Access and Boulder work from 2019 was to get the price up to $50, which was last year.
Okay.
So for 2025, we did increase the price with, this basically the CPI. So it went up to $51.50, which is the cost per permit in 2025.
Okay, thank you. And that's the last schedule currently anticipated price hike. Is that right? Like it's going to stay there?
Right, and that's part of the work of this project that we're also considering is we're going to be presenting that with additional materials towards the end of the project to kind of show where we're at in the cost recovery that was originally promised in 2019, and then how can we, like with reconfiguring some of these other permits as we're making these changes, what's that going to look like? We're doing some work to kind of evaluate how that will impact our financials.
Right. And the cost of a commuter permit, that stayed pretty stable, didn't it?
It's around, I think it's about $39.50 per month right now.
Oh, can you buy it monthly now?
You can buy it monthly now. Yeah, we recently made that change towards the end of last year. So it's a little bit more affordable for some folks, so they don't have to pay like big quarterly chunks.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But still buying it by the quarter at about $40 per period. So that would be $120. So still more than double what a resident would pay.
That's correct.
Okay. Other questions? Sorry, I didn't mean to hog it there.
No, I'm just listening.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. So I would like to go to the let's go back to bike parking. I'm going to just kind of start back at the top where you were. There's a proposal to reevaluate sort of requirements for bike parking. I'm assuming that includes at least like the number of bike parking slots and what kind of development that they would be for. Is there any consideration about and accommodating kind of larger bikes and cargo bikes and bikes with trailers and things? Is there any discussion about whether bike parking spaces should be preferentially placed the way that certain EV charging spots are or handicap access parking spots are?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as part of this, we did look at the number of bike parking spaces that we require. And that's what I was saying, that when we looked at other communities, we have pretty high numbers compared. And then the design we're also looking at, when we implemented the most recent bike parking requirements in 2014, we added location requirements, like they have to be within a certain distance of the main door. So we'll look at those again. We're working with stakeholders like Bike Boulder and Community Cycles, some of their ideas of how to improve those design requirements and accommodating the larger bikes, as well as accommodating e-bike charging, and whether we can add some requirements for like a certain amount of chargers in within.
Has there been any discussion for accommodating like sheltered bike parking locations so that?
Yeah, that'll be part of it. So we have different design standards for short-term and long-term biking, or bike parking. So we'll look at both of those.
That's great. Okay. And then here's a question, and I'm not really sure it's specific to the on-street, off-street, but whoever would like to weigh in on this. I know that there is a federal designation for a lightweight electric vehicle or a low-speed vehicle, and they're kind of capped at a certain speed. They're usually smaller. They have less stringent, because they're not really highway rated. So some less stringent like road safety and crash survivability requirements. To my knowledge, no one's offering these for sale yet. But I'm just curious if that comes online. So these would be like slightly more sturdy and roadworthy golf cart kind of things. Are we in a position right now to fold that kind of new vehicle into our existing regulatory and code framework, or would we have to come back and rethink that whole thing again? So I'm particularly interested, like if that comes around, I would think that those vehicles ought to be parking for cheaper, or be able to park in an NPP without having a permit, or have some other preferential sort of parking access, because we would want to be encouraging people to use these smaller, lighter, lower impact vehicles for their everyday trips, especially to congested places. Do we have the flexibility in what we're planning to do right now to accommodate that kind of a vehicle?
You know, I haven't had that question come up, and I don't know much about that. I don't know if Chris and Sam maybe know more about those types of vehicles, but I'd have to look at how we define like vehicle and bicycle to see how flexible it could be. But if that were to come up, we could, you know, this is the massive overhaul. If we have small tweaks that we need to make, that could be easier to do at a future date. And then part of the, I don't know, Sam, part of the question was related to on-street parking. I don't know if Sam, you have any response related to that.
I mean, historically, we haven't treated different vehicles differently in terms of permitting, with the exception of, you know, camper vans, which are pretty much not allowed within the city of Boulder. So it's certainly something that we could investigate. I think we can always be flexible and iterate on the current program. You know, that's what we're doing right now. So if it did become prevalent, you know, we could certainly revisit that. I don't know if it's currently in the scope of work for what we're planning right now, but I'm certainly happy to take that feedback and discuss.
Okay, thanks. Do the current EV charging requirements that are already covered in our environmental plan, whose name I don't remember at the moment, they have parameters about how close to it, how many chargers, how close to an entrance. So there is that kind of preferential placement for these EV spots. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of detail in there that I don't know, because it's a lot about electrical stuff,
Yeah.
about the requirements that they need. But it's pretty detailed, and it looked pretty similar to what other communities have. So we'll look at that in more detail about like distance, but as far as like a certain number that have to be EV ready versus EV capable versus it gets pretty detailed in the Energy Conservation Code. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Can we go to the TDM stuff? It's very confusing to me to be calling this a 3-tiered system when there's a tier 0 that doesn't count for anybody. That's not a tier. Can you respond to that?
Well, I mean, that's, to me, that's just kind of a naming thing, you know, or that we have some that are exempt, and then 2 levels of that have different types of requirements. So, I mean, if
there's
we
no
should name it differently, we
requirement.
can name it differently.
Okay, but there's no requirement for tier 0. And is tier 0, like, does that include just like a single family home? Is that, or is that, would that be a tier
yeah.
-1?
Well, yeah, single family homes would not come under this ordinance. It would only be for multifamily residential.
Okay. Yeah, it seems odd to me that you would have a rule on the books and say, if it's multifamily residential, these are the rules, but you don't need to comply with this particular rule if you're below a particular size.
Yeah, I mean, virtually all ordinances across the country have size exemptions. So if you're below a certain size, you're exempted from the ordinance. Many of them call them tier 0. So we were just borrowing that.
Okay. Thank you. Darcy, I see your hand is up.
Oh, I was just gonna say that there it is kind of a standard and it does provide that threshold. So you can see, where the impacted tiers begin. So I think it's important to articulate, below which is not impacted, and especially because it is, we're looking at commercial, office, industrial, multifamily. We're not looking at, single family residential.
Okay. And I know that we've been talking for years about how to make these TDM requirements sort of more mandatory and enforceable. And from the tail end of your comments, Chris, and from what I read in the memo, we still haven't figured out what that would look like. Do we have a framework for imposing deadlines, accountability, penalties if you don't meet it within a certain time frame? Would these carry on to subsequent developers and tenants?
Yes. So to answer that question, yes, it would be an ordinance that is tied to the property. So no matter who owned it, who managed it, the requirement remains. And so, what we're thinking is that for the largest developments, they would have a vehicle trip generation target. That target would be determined by the size of the development, the location of the development, and some other factors could go into that, but those are the primary ones. And then we would do annual monitoring to see if they were in compliance of that. If they were out of compliance, that's when the remedial funds are used to augment the annual funds that go to fund those TDM programs. And you keep continually add to funding until you create a program and fund a program that works to meet that target. So that's how it's done. Generally, you look at a lot of the best practices, look at 3-year cycles. So if you're compliant 3 years in a row, then annual monitoring stops, but can continue at a periodic basis, or if based on request. So we have thought of all those details. A lot of those details aren't in the memo because of what we're bringing to council is really looking at what the overall approach is. In terms of the use of financial guarantees, we want to make sure that council is comfortable with that approach, and then the tiered system, and then we'll begin fleshing out those details. But we've done a lot of work on those details. They just weren't shared in the memo at this time.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to turn to NPP questions. Sam, I noted in the memo that there were discussions, you'd looked at several other different kinds of residential parking permit and mixing, especially in zones where it's near high demand areas. I really like the use of that word. But some communities consider the availability of off-street parking. And I didn't see that in the recommendations here. And that's come up multiple times actually in current NPP, well, past, but new NPP applications. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so just to clarify, some communities, and it's pretty rare, but there are a couple, they essentially encourage folks in managed parking areas to use off-street parking if it's available, either by a pricing mechanism or by simply not allowing them to purchase permits for on-street parking. It's something that we definitely did consider for the city of Boulder, but to be honest with you, Tila, it's like really, really complicated to actually implement because it requires us knowing who has off-street parking, how much off-street parking, and maintaining that list and keeping it accurate and up to date. And just putting that together to begin with was going to be such a monumental task. It felt like the juice wasn't really worth the squeeze in terms of the city resources needed to make it happen. So that was really why we didn't make it a recommendation. Not that we didn't fully consider it. And, I think it's a really cool idea. It's just one of those things that would be really, really hard to actually implement in reality.
Okay. I'll save the rest of that thought for comment. you talked about high demand areas, which I think is great. That would that also include like hiking and recreation areas? So like I live near Sanitas. We have camp that's seasonal. So was there any thinking about regulating these things by time of year, by peak demand seasons, and would like the proximity of hiking trail access count as one of these generators that would justify using an NPP?
Right. Well, as you know, the trail access management is sort of a separate conversation at this point, but I would say in terms of, pricing, we haven't considered, aside from Chautauqua, doing seasonal pricing, because the reality is most of our commercial areas and even the school areas, most of the year are gonna be pretty well utilized. And so it's generally our perspective that it's easier for parkers to understand if the regulations don't change season to season. Like it's something that's really hard to put on a sign. And that's one of the things that was challenging for us with camp, is that, how do you put on a sign? Oh, you have to pay to park, but only on the weekends and holidays between this holiday and that holiday. But not everyone knows what the holidays are. And so I think, while we certainly can consider that, and the trail access management conversation continues, it might make more sense for some of these areas that are impacted for almost all of the year to do something that's consistent throughout the year, so that no one's questioning, when do I need to pay and when do I not need to pay. We want to make sure that it's easy for the user to understand.
Okay. I think the rest of my stuff falls into comments afterwards. So does anyone else have any clarifying questions?
Yeah. Have you looked into the concept of a parking benefits district where prices would be set at market rates and revenues would benefit the neighborhoods and blocks where they're collected?
I think this is a question for me. I think we're considering something along those lines. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a parking benefit district, but one of the things that what we're considering is, for example, to fund the TDM wallet, could we have neighborhoods opt into having paid parking, and that paid parking would fund that TDM wallet for those neighborhoods? So that's something that we're considering as well, and that we're going to be factoring into our analysis that we're doing to understand, what can we actually pay for, what can we not pay for, in terms of, those additional benefits. So that's something that hopefully you'll see more of when we come to you next.
Okay, Darcy.
I just want to clarify. So the TDM wallet that is listed here, Sam, is an expansion of the Commutify program that is currently in Caged and Boulder Junction. Is that right? Or what is the, can you say more about the design of that TDM wallet?
Right.
program?
I think,
I may be able to speak to that a little better, Sam. So I would say it's using a similar platform and technology, but kind of in a different environment. So the Commutify project is essentially, we're using a parking cash out mechanism for businesses. This would be more at the neighborhood level, where Sam, was explaining that if a neighborhood had paid parking, that revenue would be collected, and then that revenue would be reinvested back into the neighborhood and could be used to provide things like a neighborhood eco-pass or B-cycle memberships. And so that's the idea of the transportation wallet. But likely it would use a similar software platform and stuff like that that is used in our Commutify project.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think that's a really important detail.
Okay, time for feedback. And Darcy, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little of your insight from being personally involved in this.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, Tila, I want to thank you for your insightful questions and everybody, because I think, really kind of digging into the content of all three of these approaches, with regard to AMPS is really important, and to make sure that we understand all the details of everything. But as Chris said, there's a lot more detail that will come out and will be revealed as this project continues. And also, just to be clear, I've worked most closely with Chris and to understand the TDM component, and haven't dug as deeply into the on-street, off-street, but I am really excited to see the on-street parking innovations here, the TDM wallet, and especially the park and walk near schools. I would really love to see school-oriented mobility hubs where parents can reliably drop off their kids in a safe place, a quarter mile or less from their schools. In my neighborhood, this is a huge problem because there are several schools concentrated in South Boulder, and the traffic is crazy. And so I know that a lot of neighbors, we've received email about this, that neighbors in my area are really concerned about the concentration of parking during school drop-off and pickup times. And there's so many wonderful options for better drop-off and pickup areas that could really be used as successful mobility hubs for those schools. So I would really love to see that develop, and I'd love to be involved in that. With regard to the TDM work, I think Chris has done an incredible job at really digging into the tiers, and giving TDM more, or policies and the TDM ordinance, some teeth. So this is an issue that we've dealt with, where large properties haven't had that requirement to pay into a TDM program necessarily. Some have, of course, but updating those and having a way to continually kind of revisit and make sure that those remain appropriate as tenants take over those properties after they've been developed. That's really important as properties are redeveloped. So I think that we're going to see that really contribute to success of our TDM efforts. And I guess I'm very curious, and sort of as a transportation professional, I'm very interested in how all of these strategies can work together to gradually, as we move closer to our mode share targets, and we're kind of repurposing areas that would have been used for parking, or were, helping developers and property owners, make different uses of those areas. I think we're going to really see some wonderful kind of knock-on effects here, and I'm hoping that this three-part strategy really moves us closer to those overall goals. So I think it's a great start. I'm excited to see, I'm really hoping that council moves it forward so we can get all those details out there, and just revisit this as the ordinance is developed, and each of these pieces of the AMPS program comes together. So that's just my kind of quick.
Thanks very much. Mike, I know you had some comments and feedback. So if you don't mind, we can turn to you now.
Yeah, I had 2 slides I sent.
You might be able to share your screen.
Oh, okay. Let me.
I should have given you some warning. I was going to call on you next. Sorry.
Since I sent them in, now let's see.
Mike,
Maybe
I
while
can
Mike is
share.
doing that, I can just chime in and
Great.
just say I'm
Thanks,
really
Trini.
excited about, thanks. That I'm really excited about all the possibilities, and like Darcy said, I mean, just allowing this to create safe zones for drop-offs. I think that's such a fantastic opportunity for the city and for parents. And I'm in South Boulder a lot too, so I'm very familiar with what Darcy's talking about, and I think it's a really fantastic opportunity. And so kudos to the city, and kudos to Chris for all this great work, and everybody else. Is that
I guess I'm not quite clear on how those zones would work. Like I appreciate that there's discussion of allowing multiple short visits a day to an NPP zone. I think that was probably in response to one of my earlier comments about how parents trying to drop off at school, they're just there for 20 minutes, but they need to do it twice a day. And I know that as part of the it's not active transportation, but there's like a competition between schools in BVSD to have, you know, the most active walks and bikes to school, and parking a quarter mile away or a tenth of a mile away and then walking the rest of the way counts for the students.
Trip tracker.
It does. It's
There you
it's
go,
part
the
of
trip
Entrance
tracker,
to
thank
School
you.
program. Yeah. and-
Sorry, I haven't been in BVSD for a couple of years. So that's already, you know, BVSD's already tried to incentivize this. And so how would this zone or area look different or operate differently?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that we're not coming right now with the finished product to you to show you exactly how it's going to be. It's going to require some work on our part, but it would be identifying blocks that are, you know, within a certain range of those elementary schools where parents need to drop off their kids and then walk in, and make sure that we're advertising them and that the rules and regulations reflect the ability for parents to, you know, maybe park a little bit further away, a couple of blocks away, and then walk their child from there so that they can take advantage of more opportunity that's not just the opportunities that's right in front of the school.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you.
Well, and I would
Okay.
add, that
Yeah.
it's not just elementary schools.
Right.
There
Middle schools.
any environment constrained school, any school that's located in a neighborhood where access is severely limited. Southern Hills Middle School is a great example of that. So is Centennial up in North Boulder, you know, and High Peaks. I mean, there are lots of schools that are in a very transportation, traffic constrained environment. And those are the ones I think we should really start with, whether they're, you know, whatever level they are. But it's really important to actually, you know, provide an environment that helps parents make that choice to drop off their kids and not drive them up to the front door. So this is, I mean, I know that there are lots of levels of input that have to be part of that conversation, but specifically looking at those kind of environmentally constrained environments or schools would be really important.
Great, thank you, Darcy. Okay, Mike, I can see your
Oh, good.
your slide.
Oh, good. I wanted to talk about bicycle racks and the fact that we have really good standards for new developments, but they're pretty new, and we don't have enough new developments, and a lot of our existing developments are in some ways unusable, like this rack here at Home Depot, being just inches from this solid wall. I could have shown the same situation if I had a picture at Full Cycle, a bicycle stop, and I've talked to them about that. And I mean, it might be an issue where they're dealing with parking minimums. So when we get rid of that, maybe they'll have a space to put real bike racks. So, but here we also see at the Dairy Center some bikes locked to railing, and here's one of these hanging bike racks, which is really outdated, near some Section 8 housing. And then if I can go to the next one, oh, just another one of those hanging racks that got railed by a car on Broadway near my dentist. And then this whole strip mall area on the south side of Arapahoe across from the Peloton, I don't think it has any bike racks, and all the way from Conoco to Sturts and Copeland. So people just have to, like, I found this railing was the only place I could lock my bike. So I know it's daunting to think about retroactively applying these standards to all of our existing developments. But Councilmember Schuhart has some ideas about taking an incremental approach of looking at categories like large supermarkets and hospitals to begin with, and then advancing from there. So I know that's outside the scope of AMPS, but I hope that City Council can start us down that road. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I completely second. I've experienced all of those frustrations that you have pictures of. And it was sort of top of mind this afternoon as I was getting ready for this meeting. Like I know retroactive enforcement is a difficult thing, or retroactive just sort of remodeling. Still not on the right verb there, but this is not on the scale of saying like your roof on your house needs to be more fireproof than it is. You're running a risk by having a fiery roof. You are maybe missing out on customers by not having adequate bike parking. But the fix is just not the same. We are not talking about, you know, a $50,000 or $100,000 improvement here. We are talking about meeting certain engineering standards that we're enforcing in some parts of the city, and some parts of the city got overlooked. So I would really love to hear from staff about why this particular kind of requirement can't be the subject of the kind of spot enforcement that we do for shoveling sidewalks after a snow, right? It's on the books. There's no concerted effort really by city enforcement staff to nail people who aren't in compliance. But if you submit an Inquire Boulder ticket, someone's going to look into it, and maybe then that property owner has 6 months to install a compliant bike rack. Why can't we make that kind of approach?
I can take this one. Tila, that's a great point. And I was thinking with those pictures that code enforcement is a part of this story as well. And I don't know for sure exactly how, like what level they would require compliance for those type of things, especially particularly for the one that got completely destroyed. We wouldn't likely allow them to put something like that back. They'd have to come into compliance with our standards once it's removed. I'd have to look into that a little bit more, but I just want to express that we understand that this is an issue. Unfortunately, we are trying to keep this scope limited because we have that state deadline for the off-street parking, and we do think that it's really important that as we make those changes to off-street parking, especially if we are pushing for eliminating minimum bike parking requirements, we want to have the TDM ordinance coming at the same time and its changes to the on-street parking. And so that's why we're really focused on keeping this scope as is, so that it's achievable and approvable by the end of June, when we need to meet the deadline for the state. That's not to say that we would not be enthusiastic about looking into this as a future project if it's put on our work plan. And certainly there's more we would need to look into. I know the city attorney's office would need to look into the legality of retroactive application of things, and it's a little bit outside of the norm. And you mentioned we do some retroactive, but it's more for like life safety things like wildfire. So it's a complex issue. We have a very specific deadline, which is unusual, but it all kind of comes back to that trifecta that we really want to have all three of these topics considered together, and not just tackle the off-street parking by the deadline. We want to bring in TDM and on-street parking at the same time because they do so integrate with each other.
Thank you. It's a really nice way of letting me down gently. Garrett, I didn't know if your hand was up or if it was just like a mouse icon, but I saw a hand on your slide. You're trying to weigh in or no?
If you see a hand, I didn't purposely raise it.
Okay. I see Trini purposely raised her hand, so we'll move to Trini.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is such an important part of this conversation because as a city, we're trying to encourage micromobility and we're trying to encourage more people to get on their bikes. And I know that if I don't find a place to park my bike and feel that it's going to be safe, I'm not going to go there. So it affects in so many levels as a business owner, as a person that may choose to not do what we want them to do because they're fear for the safety of their bike, and with a lot of and rightfully so. So maybe it could be approached from a different angle and just kind of integrated into a different part of the conversation. I mean, maybe you guys can get support through other funding sources? I mean, I really don't know, but I think it's really such a crucial part for us to thrive in what we really want to do as a city. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I feel it's a bit akin to like ADA compliance, right? There's some places that just are not. And I don't actually know what the status is if we have a property, a publicly accessible building that, you know, has commercial activity and it's not compliant for some of these. Sometimes it gets grandfathered in and you just can't get there if you have a mobility device. But where we can make modifications, I think we should be seizing the opportunity to do so. Darcy, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, last time we had a conversation about AMPS at the beginning of this process, I think we all, I remember specifically bringing up the issue of trip chains and recognizing people's behavior as they move around the city, and knowing that, just having new developments have to meet all these requirements doesn't allow people to continue their journeys on a bike, for instance. You need to make sure that you're going to have safe, predictable bike parking at every part of your destination. And a lot of people are making lots of different stops during the day, right? So I see this, I recommended to Councilmember Schuhard some ideas that we've seen in Denver. So there's a company called Darrow that produces a electronic bike rack system that is called BikeKeep, and they're really amazing. They're not that expensive, and CDOT is providing grant funding for those kinds of projects. So that's something I'll be looking into just in my professional capacity. But I think we also really need to work on making bike parking sexy and attractive to business owners, and making sure that they are incentivized and want to accommodate bicyclists. Looking at Arapahoe, like Mike, I think that was a great sort of image that you provided of that section of Arapahoe. That whole area is being redone, right? So CO7 is undergoing a big process, and this is a wonderful moment to make the project managers behind the CO7 project, including Gene Sanson, aware of those needs, and really, how do we integrate more space for better bike parking? How do we help make sure that those business owners are excited about providing more bike parking as that becomes a more multimodal corridor? So, we've got a lot of these big projects happening right now with trying to really incentivize and increase multimodality, and bike safe, predictable, well-located bike parking that accommodates e-bikes and trailers is absolutely essential. So I want to see that also wrapped in, but I completely understand the issue of the timing of just getting part of this done and out there and approved. That's great. Let's continue to work together to make bike parking, sexy, attractive, important, valued by business owners, and helping them understand that their clientele will really appreciate it. But really keeping in mind those trip chains that people are taking every day, I think, is essential as part of this process.
Thanks, Darcy. This item's gone a little longer than scheduled, maybe because we scheduled it and I was hiding in the trunk of a car at the time, but we set this agenda. So I just want to have one last parting shot on the NPPs while we're having, thinking about retroactive placement and activity. Changing the way the existing NPP works does not function the same way as like a retroactive code enforcement issue with property owners. This is a program, the outlines of which are in, city code, but the regulations live with the city manager's office. And I'm encouraged by several of the changes and the things that you're planning to look at with the NPP and with RAMP. And I wish we could just pick one acronym and stick with it for all of them. But in particular, limiting new NPPs to where they're really necessary seems to me to go completely hand in hand with reducing the ones that are not necessary. I've been prickly in particular about the Mapleton Hill NPP for a long time. because the lot sizes here are huge and the availability of on-street frontage in front of a particular house is huge. And there are blocks of that NPP where there's literally no house with a street address on that street. It's alley access and side yards for some of these giant houses who frankly do not deserve a monopoly on the on-street space there. And it is entirely walkable to downtown. And I understand people don't want strangers coming and parking in front of their house unless it's their maid or their house cleaner or their window cleaner or their tree trimmer. And I see this all the freaking time. So I would really like, if we are going to examine whether NPPs are serving the function they ought to be and are not serving the function they ought to be, we shouldn't be falling back on a bureaucratic rule that says they have to be demonstrably underserving for 3 entire years, when you can just look at where it is and tell that that is not an appropriate block or block face for an NPP. So I'm just going to leave it there, but that was my fundamental. I got other comments, but I don't think any of them are going to be as, they're not going to make a big difference for your presentation tomorrow night to council. So in large part, I share Darcy's view. This is very encouraging progress, encouraging work. Thank you very much for that. It's always, good to see the steps in the right direction, but I think there are a couple opportunities here to make some of those steps a lot more meaningful. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so unless I see any hands real quick from Tab, nope. Excellent. We are going to move on to the next item. The Sumac Avenue project update, which is somehow scheduled for 30 minutes, and I bet you don't need all 30 minutes.
I bet we're going to use significantly less than the full 30 minutes. On
I
this
thought so.
Yes.
Thank you.
I wanted to introduce this item, which will be presented by John McFarlane, one of our senior planners. Sumac Avenue is an important project that we're working on between Broadway and 19th Street, and which many of you have heard about in the past. And what makes it unique is that due to annexation agreements that the residents along Sumac are subject to at the time that they were annexed into the city of Boulder, they have a funding obligation to participate in the improvements of Sumac. So this is an anomaly in the way we typically bring our projects forward. And because of that super intensive community engagement and bringing this one forward, we wanted to keep you informed about the process. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to John.
Thank you, Garrett, and good evening, TAB members. My name is John McFarlane, Senior Transportation Planner in the Planning Division. I'm leading planning and public engagement for the Sumac Avenue improvements, and I'm also joined on the call this evening by our project manager for the project, Roger Kane. And as Garrett mentioned, I'll be giving a brief update tonight on the project and what staff is currently working on and our public engagement. So since my last update to the board in May of 2024, the project team hosted a public open house at Crestview Elementary, photo shown on the right there, where we shared the project update since the project paused in 2020 and a concept design for the corridor on which we asked residents to provide their feedback. We also offered an online opportunity for residents to review the information and share their feedback, which lasted into the summer months. In total, from the open house and questionnaire, 80% of Sumac residents participating supported the concept design. And since that last public touch point, we've updated the concept design to reflect feedback we heard, and shown on the screen here are improvements the design focuses on. This includes pavement reconstruction, improving roadway drainage for everyday storm events, improving multimodal connectivity through new sidewalks and pedestrian crossings, a new flashing beacon crossing at Broadway to Wonderland Lake Trailhead, and preserving on-street parking and restoring landscaping where feasible, which we've heard from the community as a priority. And here's the timeline showing where we're at in the project process. In terms of where we're at in next steps, we're in the concept and final design here highlighted in red on the screen. And Roger and I are currently meeting one-on-one with Sumac Avenue property owners. We are holding these meetings to discuss the design update since the public open house. And as Garrett mentioned, with the existing annexation agreements, we're also discussing their project cost share obligation under these agreements. And as Garrett mentioned, the project is pretty unique for us in the city because the funding includes city funds and these contributions from property owners with frontage or land affected by the project. And this includes the Boulder Valley School District. Roger and I will continue meeting with the property owners through the winter. And as we're holding these meetings, residents may reach out to you all on the board with questions or concerns about the project and its funding. And we encourage you all to send staff these inquiries and we can help respond. Roger and my contact information is on the next slide. And as I said, we can help respond to inquiries from the public. After meetings conclude, we'll finalize the funding agreements with the property owners, and we anticipate beginning construction in Q3 of this year with an anticipated construction timeline of 9 to 12 months. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions y'all may have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Questions, Tab? I'll chime in. I can't see you very well.
John, can you say a little bit more about preserving on-street parking on Sumac? I'm curious about what the participants have said about that.
Yeah, so with the project improvements, we'll be installing curb and gutter. And with that, to accommodate curb gutter and the sidewalk on the north side, we'll have to restrict parking in some areas. And with that also we're looking at the right-of-way lines and where existing landscaping is. And so in discussing with property owners, especially with that they have the cost share obligation, we want to take their feedback into account since they'll be sharing the cost of the project. And so, one thing that we're talking to them on is if they want on-street parking in front of their house, we can kind of accommodate that where feasible. But kind of on the flip side of that, if folks have landscaping and they want to preserve that, that's kind of at the cost of on-street parking. So Roger and I are, as we're meeting with them to discuss the design and the cost share, kind of walking through what that looks like in front of their house.
Yeah, thanks. It's a really challenging street and environment. And it's another one of those areas that's very kind of constrained for access to Crestview. So I would connect with the on-street parking amps discussion.
Yeah, we've that's a great point about Crestview, and we've been in contact with the principal there in BVSD. And one improvement that wasn't listed on the screen there is striping the pickup and drop off zone in front of Crestview. Right now there's kind of a gravel section right there, and have discussed some issues that Crestview has been having. So that should help. And then also, potentially restricting parking on the south side of Sumac right there across from Crestview. So parents aren't dropping kids off and then they're kind of running across the street to school. So that was a request from the principal there.
Thank you. John, would you mind taking your screen down so I can see other people a little better? Thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions, Tab? Me neither. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay. Last matter from staff I have is Broadway Transit upgrades.
Yes, I'll provide a brief introduction on this one as well. So as you all are aware, the Broadway corridor is a super important part of our transportation network and is a main artery that is part of our core arterial network program focus, and is a principal corridor for bus usage in both local and regional transit. And we have a few different initiatives and efforts that are coming forward that we'd like to provide an update about. And so I am going to hand it off to Daniel Sheeter to talk about our updates here, as well as Brian Wiltshire, the project manager for a couple of these projects. And we also have Roger Kane on the line, who's another project manager for the signal work coming forward. So Daniel, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you. Is that coming through for everybody? I have your faces up in the corner. Just want to make sure you're not seeing those again as well.
No,
okay.
I can see you. Just to clarify, can you tell me what Broadway between where and where? I was a little distracted for a second.
Yeah, Brian's going to kick us off here and he'll walk through that. Walk through the limits.
I recognize that scene. If that's not what you're asking though.
Brian, you there?
I can see he's not muted.
Is that better?
Yeah, there, that's better. Yes, thank you.
I can hear you
All right,
now
sorry.
without the headphones. Yeah.
Headphones not working. All right, let's get that fixed. All right. Well, okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Wiltshire, City Boulder Project Manager for this project. And I'd like to begin by thanking everyone for their time this evening as we spend a few minutes reviewing the Broadway Transit Improvements Project. The team began working on this project in June of 2024 and has been working diligently to bring you the design and bus lane study that we'll be presenting this evening. Next slide. All right. Project area is between Regent Drive and Table Mesa Drive. It's bracketed in blue that you see on the map in front of you. The existing transit service along the Broadway corridor is the most frequent in the city, with a bus every 2 to 4 minutes. The lines for each corresponding route you can see on the map, and each respective peak hour frequency. Next slide. The overview map is oriented with north on your left, which is shown with Regent, and then on south is on your right, which is Table Mesa. In addition to the short segments of dedicated bus lanes on the northbound approach to Regent and the southbound left turn approach to Table Mesa, the intersection upgrades will also include multimodal safety improvements for everyone traveling through the intersections, and we'll detail those in some following slides. Next slide, Daniel. All right, so the city has a variety of plans and policies that guide this project, including the Transportation Master Plan, the CAN Initiative, the Sustainability, Equity, and Resilience Framework, and the regional plans, including RTD's Northwest Area Mobility Study, or NAMS. The NAMS identified Broadway as a priority corridor for transit improvements to support bus regional transit service. The policy framework is detailed on the virtual open house. Daniel, next slide. All right. For reference, in the southbound direction, the scheduled transit travel times on the corridor increased from 11 minutes during off-peak travel time to 19 minutes during peak periods, and on-demand performance falls from 85% to 70% in the peak travel period. Buses turning on to Table Mesa from Broadway are on average delayed 107 seconds at the intersection compared to 63 seconds for vehicles. At the Regent intersection, buses and vehicles are delayed approximately 30 seconds. Next slide. The project will also improve crossings and upgrade facilities for people walking, biking, and rolling at both intersections, including realigning and straightening adjacent multi-use paths, closing a secondary commercial driveway, which is in the southwest corner of the Broadway Table Mesa intersection, upgrading curb ramps on all corners of the intersection to comply with Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, and then realigning right turn bypass lanes to increase the visibility and safety of pedestrians and other users at the crossing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Daniel.
Thanks, Brian. Daniel Sheeter, Principal Transportation Planner supporting the project. So in this next set of slides, we'll walk through the proposed conceptual designs for the intersection improvements that Brian provided the overview for. And I encourage you to review the virtual open house, which we'll link at the end of the presentation. And it has this slider feature that shows a detailed comparison of the existing and proposed configurations. So we're going to start here at the north end of the project area at the intersection with Regent Drive. And so as Brian mentioned, during peak periods, those northbound travel lanes approaching the intersection are congested. And in that photo, well, multiple photos, both the intro photo and the photo a couple slides ago, show how buses can be stuck in traffic there, approaching a stop on the opposite side of the intersection. So the proposed design you see on the slide adds a northbound bus lane through the intersection, labeled with that number 1, to allow buses to bypass traffic queues and reduce impacts on other vehicles by removing those buses from those primary vehicle travel lanes. This reduces travel delay for transit riders, particularly during peak periods. People who drive can still cross the bus lane to access Regent Drive via the right turn lane that you see in the center of the screen. And so this treatment has been very successful at locations along Broadway and in the 28th Street corridor. We looked at the existing Q bypass lane at Broadway and Table Mesa heading southbound that exists today. And so this lane permits southbound buses like the Skip to have just a 2-second average vehicle delay compared to a 25-second average vehicle delay for southbound vehicles. So moving on to some of the multimodal safety improvements of the proposed conceptual design that are informed by analysis from the Vision Zero Action Plan. Highlighted here in really number 2 is a realigned right turn bypass lane from Broadway to Regent Drive that would increase the visibility and safety of people along using the Broadway multi-use path. And the design was informed by new guidance from the recently updated design and construction standards. Also kind of moving away from that right turn lane and the raised crossing there, the project proposes to realign an existing pedestrian path that diverges from the two-way bike path in this location into a widened path with separate pedestrian and two-way bike paths. So that continues through that through part of CU there, that lawn, and connects back up to the Broadway path south of the intersection. And then finally, as Brian mentioned, curb ramps are upgraded throughout the intersection or on all corners to comply with Americans with Disability Act and improve accessibility. Moving south to the Broadway and Table Mesa Drive intersection. Again, congestion in the southbound left turn lane here causes significant delays for transit that's bound for Table Mesa Drive and the US 36 corridor. And due to the way the corridor operates, buses can be delayed more than private vehicles in that southbound left turn lane. And so those long queues also spill back and overflow into the adjacent through lanes, resulting in impacts on through travel as well. So you're seeing the proposed design here that adds a second southbound left turn lane that would be dedicated to buses only to allow them to bypass queue traffic in the adjacent southbound left turn lane. We'd also extend the southbound left turn lane to allow for longer queues and move left turning vehicles out of the southbound through lanes. And then a couple of multimodal safety improvements are also incorporated here in the conceptual design. They include the closure of an existing driveway along the Broadway multi-use path that's very close to the southwest corner of the intersection to reduce potential conflicts between vehicles and people on the multi-use path. Access to the shopping center is still maintained via driveways further south on Broadway or off Table Mesa Drive. And then the final area to walk through is the northeast corner of the intersection. And so the project proposes to realign the existing westbound right turn bypass lane from Table Mesa to Broadway to slow turning vehicle speeds and improve safety for people on the Broadway path connecting to and from the Bear Creek path and the Martin Acres neighborhood. The frequency of buses making this movement, as well as the intersection geometry, made it challenging to change the alignment of the right turn lane further. But you are seeing the Refuge Island labeled with the number 5 there, being increased in size to shorten crossing distance and accommodate a realigned westbound bike lane that reduces the area where bikes mix with right turning vehicles and buses. And all of that US 36 regional transit and transit from South Boulder Road and Table Mesa here make this corresponding westbound right movement onto Broadway. So it's a really key transit movement onto the Broadway corridor. And then the final component of the project is the bus lane study. We are coordinating with CDOT and DRCOG to study the feasibility of repurposing the outside or rightmost vehicle lanes to bus lanes on Broadway between Table Mesa and Regent. So this map, again oriented with north to the left, shows the study area in blue, which might be a little small on your screens, but it's these outside lines to correspond with where there already exists a third lane, a third travel lane. And the study will analyze traffic and transit operations to assess feasibility of repurposing that outside third lane to a bus lane, but will not implement any changes. So the intersection improvements are funded for construction through this project, but the bus lane, this analysis of bus lane is just a study, and the project will not implement those changes. These curbside bus lanes would be used by buses and right-turning vehicles, similar to the bus lanes that were recently installed this past summer on Colorado Avenue between Folsom and 30th Streets. So they help buses move more efficiently, facilitating on-time performance and improving safety by separating right-turning vehicles from through traffic at intersections and driveways. Buses also do not stop in a through vehicle lane when accessing bus stops, reducing the potential for rear-end crashes. It's important to note that the grant received for this project, as I mentioned, only funds the study. And so further funding would need to be pursued in order to implement any changes recommended by the bus lane study. And any future proposed bus lanes will also need to be added to DRCOG's regional transportation plan prior to implementation. We also want to mention two separate but related traffic signal projects to improve pedestrian safety. These separate grant-funded projects will be constructed at Broadway and Regent, so kind of overlapping with some of the intersection improvements we detailed. That project is slated for construction in spring or summer of this year. And then the next intersection south of Regent with Broadway and Baseline Road is slated for construction in late 2025. And so these projects, you see in these photos, examples of the existing traffic signals from Regent and Baseline at Broadway here on the slide, and the projects modify those signals to allow for different types of left turn signal phasing. And so the near-term Broadway and Regent Drive project would implement left turn phasing that does not allow vehicles turning from those side streets of 20th or Regent to turn left when pedestrians are crossing Broadway at all times. And then the Broadway and Baseline project will modify the eastbound and westbound Baseline Road approaches to allow different types of left turn signal phasing to operate throughout the day based on conditions and our signal practices. The team is not requesting feedback on these projects through the current transit improvements open house due to separate timing and funding. So I'll turn it back over to Brian to wrap up the presentation with next steps for the transit project.
All right, thanks, Daniel. All right, so next steps for the project are outlined as follows. The project is currently seeking feedback through the virtual open house, which is currently open, but this is the last week for comment. Then we have the design that will be finalized this spring and summer, and we have construction anticipated for the summer of 2026. So we'd definitely love for TAB to kind of get the word out about the virtual open house. Encourage anybody to send in any feedback that they would like, and definitely visit the open house and kind of see what we're doing. So with that, we'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you guys so much for this wonderful presentation. I am taking over for Tila, and just wanted to see if anybody from TAB had any feedback that they'd like to share. Mike looks like he has his hand up.
Yeah, I think these are great improvements for bus traffic and some incremental improvements for safety. It looks like I'm concerned that we're still working on slip lanes, and obviously these are not new slip lanes, but is there any thought about whether we should be continuing to have slip lanes which seem to prioritize vehicle speed over pedestrian safety?
I can start us off, or go ahead, Garrett.
Tackle that one.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the comment, Mike. Yeah, we are proposing to maintain the slip lanes or right turn bypass lanes. But as I mentioned, we are realigning them and squaring them up to the side street as much as possible. So the geometry changes pretty dramatically from today in an effort to reduce those turning vehicle speeds, and improve safety for users crossing the slip lane. The geometry of both of these intersections, both Regent and Table Mesa, and I mentioned it briefly on the Table Mesa slide, makes it challenging to kind of square it up completely, because they aren't, those side streets, Table Mesa and Regent, aren't meeting Broadway at a right angle. They're skewed. So we did look at it, but feel like this is kind of the best balance of still providing transit priority for the routes on Broadway. And there may be an impact there to consider as well with the alignment of these lanes, and then going as far as we can with raised crossings and the geometry as well, with what you saw on the screen, to improve safety from the existing condition.
Thank you.
So, Daniel, because of what you're mentioning, I am very, very familiar with this corridor and these intersections. I travel them by bike, by car, but I walk them. I mean, it's just, I'm very, very familiar with them. And that particular crossing that you're mentioning, because of the geometry, it's just the actual signal that for people in a vehicle turning left onto Broadway, like heading northbound, if you're on Regent or 20th, it is so confusing, it's so unclear. And at one point, there's no left-hand signal, left, like dedicated left-hand signal. So you're left in the middle of the road and you have pedestrian crossings. I think on a good thing, since you guys are working on these intersections, if you could also look at pedestrian intervals, because that there's just so many kids and so many, you have college students, you have students from New Vista, and just like the regular commuter traffic. It's just really bike pedestrian traffic that's super heavy. And what I was going to suggest, if we can somehow straighten that that pole so it's actually facing, I don't know, we'd have to visit it again. I mean, I know that when we did the CIP tour, I tried to mention it, but yes, it's at such an angle, it's such an awkward facing, I don't know, it's just bizarre. So maybe revisiting that and definitely adding some additional measures with pedestrian intervals. Because it's just really scary. But I am so excited to hear all of these new things coming up, and I think they will improve safety dramatically. So thank you so much. Darcy, do you have anything? I can't see. Oh, thank you. Now I can see Darcy again.
No, I don't have anything specifically. I mean, I acknowledge that this is a study, as was mentioned, and is not funded. And so if we get closer to implementing some of these modifications, I'll have more to contribute.
Thank you. And I think now, I don't know if anybody wants to add anything.
Trini, just a brief follow-up on your comment. The separate signal projects I mentioned do realign some signal poles to accommodate the new infrastructure. So I believe that your comment there will be addressed to some extent by that new signal pole location. So
that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Daniel. Yeah, because it is a true concern. It's scary.
And Daniel, we should probably clarify. It's only the study of the conversion to the bus lane that is not funded. The intersection improvements themselves at Regent and Table Mesa are funded, so you will see those constructed next summer. So just to be clear on that.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Thank you. And I mean, unless anybody else has anything else to add, I think we can move on to matters of the board. I think it's whatever. Is that correct?
Open comment.
Open comment.
That's what I see next on the agenda, yes.
There's nothing scheduled, Trini, just if any board members have specific items they wanted to bring up?
I have something, but Darcy beat me, so Darcy goes first.
Well, I'll be brief. I just wanted to say, we haven't discussed snow removal at all this evening, but I want to acknowledge that we've heard about snow removal issues from our community. And I had a really moving experience recently walking on Toadley Street here in South Boulder, walking from the Table Mesa Shopping Center, and I was heading south, whatever. I think it's south, right? Southeast, southwest. And so I'm walking, and I ran into Craig Teller from the Center for People with Disabilities. He also lives in South Boulder. He's a wheelchair user, and he was wheeling down the middle of the street because so few property owners had shoveled the sidewalks. It was totally impassable by someone in a wheelchair unless he was out in the middle of the street. He's a strong person. He can get out of the way if he needs to, but it was unsettling. And we did talk about it. We talked about how the sidewalks were snow packed and snow covered. And I myself was walking in the street because it was many of those sections of sidewalk were impassable. So I would like to encourage, I know that our snow removal guidelines and policies are set. I really want us to do more to help property owners understand the importance of removing snow from sidewalks in a routine and efficient way that also ensures that ice does not build up on them, because there are so many people walking and wheeling in, all over the city who need to be able to get to bus stops, who need to be able to get to their shopping areas to get home. And it's unsafe for children going to those schools as well. If you're kicked out into the street, if anybody's kicked out into the street, it presents a huge risk. So I want us to do better at helping property owners remove snow, and for our policies to complement the need for those efforts, and to just I would like to see more messaging. I'd like to see some contests or some incentives or prizes, or I don't know, because we've been talking about this for many years. But how can we do more to help property owners understand their responsibility and its impact on the community? So that's what I wanted to add today.
Well, thank you, Darcy. Yeah, that kind of goes along the lines of what I wanted to add. My comment is more as a driver, but Craig Teller is a dear friend of mine, and I've spent multiple days with him, and it's eye-opening. It's just really mind-boggling, the things that we take for granted and that, really can make or break a journey for someone like Craig. And we do really need to highlight those things. And like you said, I do believe in positive encouragement. So I think if there would be like incentive programs opposed to, I know that you're supposed to get fined, but I think that it'd be so cool if we could create programs that would actually encourage people in a positive way to want to change things and to make it a safer community for everybody. And on that note, I know that we approved a 3-inch removal allocation of resources to bike paths or multi-use paths, but I live in a very steep road. And even though it was a small snow accumulation, it really, because of how my road's like this, it was impassable. And if I wanted to ride my bike, I wouldn't be able to get to the bike path. It was just, and then of course it got cold, and so that slush turned into ice, and it was just a disaster. I know that there was a lot of letters that were written to city council members, and they share my concerns. So I really invite us to take a look at what we had approved and kind of reanalyze what circumstances and what streets can be the exception to the rule. And perhaps we have to take into account the temperature and not just the snowfall. I mean, there's other factors that will really impact how we can travel, whether it's by bike or by car or by foot, and make it safe or not. I mean, one of these times, my car, I wasn't able to brake. So I was terrified. So it's just really taking into account what we want to accomplish, and we want to accomplish safe roads that everybody can travel, and safe sidewalks and safe mobility. So I don't know how we can do that. Maybe an agenda item coming up. I really don't know what the process looks like, but I really do think that we need to take that, as smart thinking individuals, I think we can go back and amend things that we have approved and make sure everybody's safe. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that, but.
Yeah, I'll chime in here, Trini and Darcy, to say I appreciate your thoughts and your feedback about the snow and ice response program. As you've observed, there's been a lot of communication and feedback from a variety of community members about how the modifications to the program are going in this winter season. And so we are continuing to monitor the performance and how it's serving the community. And I can certainly bring your comments and your thoughts back and discuss those with Valerie, as we're also interacting with the city council and the city manager's office and all the inquiries that are incoming. So I appreciate your own personal feedback, and particularly the experience of those that are people with disabilities trying to navigate their way around the community. I thought you brought some thoughtful suggestions, Darcy, so appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Garrett. And I don't know, I've never done this before, so I think that's all we have. Meredith? Are we actually gonna end this early?
Need a motion to adjourn?
Yes,
Is it time?
I think so. I call for a motion to adjourn.
I move. We adjourn this meeting of the Transportation
And
Advisory
Mike,
Board.
will you second it? Mike
I
seconds it.
second it.
So we're adjourned, and we ended really early. So thank you so
Great.
much, everyone, for their time, and we'll see each other next month.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.
Appreciate it.
Night.
Night.